Hi guys, and welcome to A Dog's Soul, an empath's guide to your dog's feelings. Today we're going to talk about how to introduce a fearful dog to strangers. So stay tuned and have fun. Alright, so I work a lot with fearful dogs, and whenever I am asked to come home to a client with a fearful dog, I see a lot of overwhelm in the dog. So I have almost completely switched to online training, and at least in the beginning, so that whenever the dog is ready to have visitors over, the humans are as well. So the humans know exactly what to do before this situation happens. But of course, when I come to a home, it's always very exciting for everybody, and people act differently, and that can set off the dog more than when another person comes to the house. And it's also different when people and dogs meet strangers on a walk or something like that, so outside of the home. So I'd start with outside training as long as the dog is fine with going outside. If he's not, then I wouldn't introduce any strangers at all. It's too soon. When the dog is ready to go outside and he's scared of the people you encounter, I do two things. First, include walks where you don't meet anybody. So in an area or at a time where there are no people. It's the same thing with leash reactivity, actually, because with leash reactivity, we almost always see a fear component as well. So whenever we have a dog who gets overwhelmed by daily situations, it's super helpful to just switch our daily situations to something the dog can handle and actually enjoy. And that way, we give the dog the opportunity to calm down a little bit and to decompress and to regenerate. And we get an overall decreased stress level, which is awesome for training. So this is what I like to include as often as possible. And when it comes to training, there is always a distance where a stranger is okay for the dog. And we have to find that distance. With that distance, we can train. Because the dog is feeling okay, he's not already in survival mode and not able to learn anymore. He is still listening and at least halfway relaxed. And with humans, there are, from the dog's point of view, two sides. A dangerous one and a not so dangerous one. So it is always, or almost always, easier to present the back side to the dog first. And every dog has preferences and difficulties with different looking people. So some dogs are more afraid of men, some dogs are more afraid of women, some dogs are more afraid of people that walk in a different way because, for example, they use some kind of walking aid, or some dogs just don't like people on bicycles or on scooters or on inline skates or with hats or with white clothing or just kids. It's whenever we find out what is more difficult for the dog and what is less difficult for the dog, we can start training with the less difficult ones. And it's also always a question of what's okay for the dog in terms of movement from the person. Some dogs like it better if the person moves away from the dog and the dog can just sniff after. Some dogs like it better when the person is on a bench seated somewhere and not moving. Some dogs find that very creepy and they don't like it when a person does not interact with them at all. Some dogs decide only with their noses. So some people smell dangerous for them, some people don't. That's where it gets really tricky for us because we have no idea what the dog smells and we can't really pick people we know will work well or we know will be more difficult because we don't know beforehand. We just have to find out during training. But if we train in real life situations, so we just do our decompression walks and then we pick an area where we can have a lot of distance to some people because they are just doing stuff and we can let our dog watch them. That is always a fun exercise to do because we can just watch our dog watch the people and help only if it's needed. Otherwise, we can just let the dog do his thing and have a lot of control over the situation, have a lot of choices. And whenever the dog gets stuck, we get to help. All right? And the more tricky the situations get and the more advanced the training gets, the more we need to teach our dog up front. So we need specific cues and things, exercises that can help the dog in a situation. And that is always very dependent on the individual. So we can't just say one exercise fits every dog. It's not that easy. We have to see what's possible for every dog, what helps every dog, what is our dog's need in that moment. A relatively safe bet is increasing distance. So whenever we see our dog struggling, increasing distance will almost always take the pressure off and just relax the situation a little bit. And sometimes when we have a dog who kind of has to meet somebody very quickly, it can also help to choose an area where it smells really interesting for the dog. So it actually helps if we have a dog with a high interest in wildlife. We pick an area with a lot of wildlife and we just meet there. And depending on what the dog likes better, we either start with letting the person walk in front and the dog follows, or we let the person follow the dog and just come closer. It's possible to switch if we chose the more difficult thing for our dog, but the switch again has to be with a lot of distance. So the area we are training in should have everything we might need. So maybe we need more distance to the sides of our path, then a heavily wooded area would be very difficult, for example. Or we need a lot of distractions, then maybe some kind of animals the dog can watch would be a great idea. Or maybe the dog is very friendly with other dogs and the person we like to introduce to the dog has a dog, then it could help to bring that dog along. It's always a thing of what could help our fearful dog, and we work from there. Two things that almost always go wrong are corrections in any kind of way. So when we put pressure on, maybe we can suppress the dog's behavior. So the dog just acts as little as possible, but he still feels afraid. Or luring towards whatever is perceived dangerous for our dog. That creates a conflict in the dog because he wants whatever we are luring with, and he wants to get away from whatever we are luring towards. So this is not a very comfortable feeling, and we want to have our dog make good experiences with that new person. We want to show our dogs that it's fun to meet new people and that they don't get overwhelmed. If we lure towards something the dog is afraid of, it is no fun. It is overwhelming again. And yes, sometimes the dog overcomes his fear on his own, but it's kind of a dangerous bet to make because it could just go the exact opposite way. Okay? And if we are trying to introduce strangers to our home, it is always more easy to meet that person outside, or not always, but very often. And to take a little walk before entering the house, and then just entering the house altogether. And then sometimes it's easier for the dog to get something to chew on or to lick, as long as he's not resource guarding that thing. And a relaxation zone always helps, where the dog knows that nobody will bother him there. Some dogs need a lot of support when there are strangers at the home, and they need a lot of reinforcement, a lot of praise, and a lot of good things happening to them in the beginning. And some dogs are fine as long as the visitor doesn't move. So if we have a dog who just won't have it if somebody moves, we can ask our visitors to tell us before they want to get up. And we can ask the dog to do something that helps the dog cope with the situation. Again, this is very individual, and different things help different dogs. So that's why assessing the dog and situation and everything around it is so important. And if we do a good job, and if we help the dog where it's needed in a way that is actually helpful, we can have a dog who gets curious about strangers, and that's when we have won. Because yes, it can still happen that some strangers set the dog off or trigger a fear response again, but it will not be that heavy, it will not be that intense, and it might even never happen again. And when we can spark curiosity in our dogs, it kind of counteracts fear. And when that happens, it just needs a little more of good experiences, so the curiosity does not get punished. Like when we have a dog who shows curiosity, and every single time he does that, the person suddenly turns around and starts him, that would be a punishing experience. We don't want that. We want something like whenever he shows curiosity, the person, for example, loses a treat, steps away, and the dog can eat the treat. That would be a good experience, right? So this would be a perfect outcome. If it can't get that way because the dog is just not having it with strangers, we can still achieve a dog who ignores people. And I think in some situations that's even the better way. And if we get to that point and we see that the dog is still not interested in people, I think it's okay. We can just accept it that our dog is happy with us, and that's it. So why don't you write me in the comments, or if you're listening on everywhere else besides YouTube, write me an email or an Instagram PM and let me know what your goals would be for your fearful dog. I'd love to read those, and I'm very curious about if you want your dog to interact with strangers or if you are fine with your dog ignoring people. That's it. I'd love for you to rate and review the show. That way, more people will find it and we can together help more fearful dogs, more anxious dogs, more reactive dogs, and of course, they're humans. Have a wonderful time with your dog, and we'll see each other next time. Bye!